With us this morning, we have Mike Papantonio, Hall of Fame trial attorney, jazz musician, and best-selling author. He's got a new book out. It is Inhuman Trafficking, bringing back Deke one more time, Pap. Good morning.
How are you doing, Rick?
I am doing great. For our listeners, if you haven't read the other books, it's Law and Disorder, Law and Vengeance, Law and Addiction, and we've run out of law titles.
Yeah, we got Inhuman.
But you've covered so many things that are tied to the practice that you have. You've looked at environmental issues with big oil with the first book, with Law and Disorder. Vengeance was about the gun industry, and opioids was about, addiction was about opioids, which was ahead of the curve of all the TV shows we now have
everybody's
about.
coming out with one now.
Now they are. I feel like going through your books, it is a case study in how you practice, which is it's an interesting challenge of doing a mass torts case when you're taking on big oil, big pharma, the gun industry. For our listeners, as you put together a mass tort case, what are the pieces that you have to consider when you look at it?
Well, I think the most important point is need. Okay, are you doing something all the way back to tobacco when we first launched the tobacco case? Good God, people dying by the millions, and there was no effort to even slow down that process. So you start with the need. The opioids was the same way. You have to start with 150 people a day dying. Was there a need for us to put the kind of attention, the kind of money and effort we put into that? And there certainly was. We've handled, I think, 47 of the biggest pharmaceutical cases in the country. Every time we analyzed it, there was a need because people were dying from defective products. They were dying because the drug industry had lied to them about clinical data that they just simply made up. So I think, with human trafficking right now that we're involved with, there's a need for that. Mm-hmm. And so I think we start there, and then we say what is the best way to get our arms around it. Now, the books are a reflection of everything. There's nothing in any of the books that aren't true. That's not true. Right. They're cases we've actually handled, and I've simply modified it in a way that it's hopefully a good read, and you come away thinking, wow, I really learned something about that industry.
Well, the first book introduced what I consider the base characters, Deke and his firm. And then in each of the other stories, you add additional character to drive the narrative a different way. Talk a little bit about Deke.
Well, Deke is a composite. People always ask me, you writing about yourself? No, a little bit, but it's all a composite. When you practice law for 40 years and you try as many lawsuits as I have all over the country, from California to New York to Miami, name it, I've probably been involved with a lawsuit there. You're introduced to a lot of different, what I think are interesting, sometimes damaged personalities, talented personalities, but personalities that really are human. I don't think the public wants to read, or they want to, we're living when everything is Marvel comic books, everything is DC comic books. It's like we have a whole damn generation that can't understand that, there's reality. We got to deal with reality. Everybody's not Superman. And so the characters, and all the characters that are created, they've got barnacles on them, man. They're not just they're not Supermen. They're people. Deke is a good example of that. You read Deke and you go, oh my God, this guy's pretty complicated.
Well, in each of the stories, there's a different edition, a different attorney that comes in, and I think that lets Deke. It allows for different type of personalities to get involved in the case and drive the story. We saw it in Law and Vengeance, where you brought in a female protagonist. That,
Gina Romano, what a great character.
really,
man.
really. Yeah.
You know, you read her and you go, wow, she's a pretty strange character, but she's a wonderful trial lawyer. You don't know if you'd want to be married to her, but you go, wow, what an incredible trial lawyer.
And then when you read Law and Addiction, which it really personalizes the struggles that people go with opioid addiction, what a horrible drug it is and what it's done to our society. As a suggestion, you had me read Dreamland, and when you read that and you go to your book, and then I began interviewing people that were dealing with opioid addictions, and the stories in the book as well as in the nonfiction Dreamland are here in the Panhandle and all over the country.
Let me throw this out. Why were we, you and me, why were we the first people talking about opioids? Okay, you know, this is just a true story. People may not know this.
Right.
But we were dealing with these stories a year before it ever got on corporate media's radar.
Right.
I was writing this book a year before then. Why is that? It's because corporate media is dead. If you're watching the nightly news, you're one of the most uninformed, maybe even misinformed individuals walking around. Because, you see, corporate media couldn't cover the opioid story. You know why? Because all of their advertisers were paying $10 million a year, whether it was all the distributors, all the manufacturers, and Cardinal, AmerisourceBergen, McKesson. You know, these are advertised. You can't turn on your television and go 10 minutes without a pharmaceutical ad. That's why the media wasn't talking about it. So when we brought the lawsuit, you remember you started writing about this when I brought that lawsuit.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, you know, Wall Street Journal's covering it, the Washington Post is covering it, and we're supplying the information to them. Because corporate media is dead. It is useless. And if you think you're getting information from corporate media nowadays, you're in la la land. Same way when in human trafficking. The same thing. With trafficking, why is it that the media still is not telling these stories? Why do I have to write a fiction book in hopes that somebody's going to read the book and understand what's happening in their backyard? Why is that? Because now what do we know? We know trafficking goes all the way to the top of the game, all the way to Wall Street.
Right.
And this book talks about the money coming from Wall Street, the trucking industry, that advertisers, you know, there again, corporate media can't do it because their advertisers get mad at them and they pull the money. So, you know, Rick, used to be in 1980, there were 55 independent news sources, just like yours, okay? You know what? You know how there's 3 organizations that own all of the media now.
Right.
And if they want Donald Trump to lose, they all pile up on Donald Trump. If they want whatever it is, their political accomplishment that they want, they all work together. You never have any meaningful dialogue about what's really happening around us. And in human trafficking, that book explains what trafficking is, how it works, but it entertains you at the same time.
Well, and the human trafficking issue is one that's invisible. It's one on a lot of different levels. We also know that you know we've seen where people have called prostitution a victimless crime, and they've tried to normalize it. But then, in thanks to you and some of the interviews that I've been able to have and talk to people, that these victims are young girls and young boys. They are integrated into the hospitality industry, casino stories and hotel stories.
Well, they're recruited, Rick.
Right.
The one thing that's happening right now, and it involves Wall Street clearly, is there's a company in Canada. They're the clearinghouse for pornography, okay, all over the world. One of the biggest clearinghouses in the world for pornography. All right, they know who all the traffickers are. They have a Rolodex. I mean, you know, let's call it a Rolodex.
Right.
They know how to reach these folks. So they call perv and some L.A. So there's more pervs in L.A. trafficking than the only other competitive area is New York. So they call Pervville in L.A. and they say, we need you to film to do a film of a 14 or 15-year-old being brutally raped in a hotel room. And then, would you do that for us? So they film it, they pay the trafficker money to do it, then they take that and they send it all over the world. Now, they ran out of money for some reason. I don't know why, but they ran out of money about 4 years ago. You know who came in to save them? Wall Street. $700 million to these pervs, these just sociopaths in Canada. And so they chose to do business, and they kept that business alive. Or how about the trucking industry? You know, you got women being trucked from L.A. to New York, all the way across the United States. And as they're being trucked, these cats are on the truck on the radio saying we're going to be at stop number 35 in a day. Everybody come in, have sex with our truckload of 14 and 15-year-old sex slaves. So they come into that truck stop and leave. Why does the truck stop do it? Because it brings in business. They buy food, they buy gasoline, they stay overnight, they use hotels. And so it's all about money, Rick. And we think that human trafficking is some isolated situation like that movie Taken. You know, we think, oh, that's all there is to it. Well, it's not.
Right.
It's a lot more complicated. They're recruiting girls in the Ukraine. That's part of the story in the Ukraine. You covered the story.
Right.
When it happened.
Right. We saw it here in Northwest Florida, where the workers they were bringing in workers for restaurants and hotels, kept them in, pile them into one house, keep their visas so they couldn't go anywhere.
H-2B workers.
Yeah, and they drove them where they went to go, took their paychecks,
and then what it's called a step up. They go to Ukraine. They interview these girls. Hey, how would you like to be in the service industry? They bring them back to the United States. They put them behind they let them they're a greeter at a hotel for a few weeks, and they say, well, how'd you like to make more money?
Right.
And then, we just happen to own a strip club down the road. You can be a greeter in the strip club. And then 2 weeks later from that, how'd you like to make more money? Well, you can do that by dancing on the pole.
Right.
Then 2 weeks after that, how would you like to make more money? Well, great. I'm going to introduce you to this cat named Tom. He's out in the audience. He wants to meet you. At that point, Rick, they disappear.
Right.
They're in the system. They are being they're being traded as sex slaves. And you know what their life expanse is? 5 years.
Wow.
If they live 5 years, that's extraordinary, because they're going to die of drug overdose. They're going to die of homicide. They're going to die of suicide. They're going to die of sexually transmitted diseases. And just pure despair. But that's the system. And you know what? We have a Department of Justice that's known exactly how this works forever. Homeland Security, this thing that's supposed to, this is the new thing. This is the new police. Homeland Security is supposed to oversee these types of things. They were just busted. I don't know if you followed it. Georgia, they busted where they had 20,000 slaves working as slaves, being
Right.
held captive as slaves over a period of a couple of years, digging onions, literally being held slaves. You know where they came from, right? They came over the border. Biden's talking about, this is all about compassion. We're bringing these people over the border for compassion. Hell no. They're bringing these people over the border because U.S. Chamber of Commerce wants cheap labor. They don't want to send work out over throughout the country, overseas anymore. They want to bring them in because it's even cheaper. And that's what it's about. And so those people that were trafficked there in Georgia, that's exactly what happened. Cartels brought them in. And they do the same thing with sex slaves. It's going on all around us, man.
Yeah. The book is Inhuman Trafficking. It is a very, very good read. It brings you into the issues and understanding what they are. As Mike has told you, this is a tragedy happening around us every day. That similar to what we saw with opioids and with the gun industry and environmental stuff. So this is an opportunity. This is sort of a reboot of the series because you've got a new publisher, a new agent. You've got a co-writer that you're working with, that you've worked with in the past. Mm-hmm. It's a real. If you didn't read the other books, you're going to be able to get into this one and take off.
Yeah, you don't have to read the other ones to get to this one. This one is it's so timely, Rick. I feel like it's important on so many levels. I can promise you it'll be a page turner. It moves fast. I've created a character you'll love. His name is Michael. He's what they call a PJ, pararescueman, trained right down the road here.
At Eglin. Right.
Yeah, exactly. And so he's been hired by the law firm as a young lawyer, and he's a bad cat. So
well, it's doing very well, and you can buy it on Amazon, just about everywhere you want to buy it. Local bookstores are carrying it. Mike, thank you so much for coming on the show this morning.
Thank you, Rick.